This audio reading is taken from the book The Bible and the Newspaper by Charles Spurgeon. Our selected reading is entitled Conscientious Separation. A conscience void of offence toward God and toward men. Acts 4:16. If the Lord be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. 1 Kings 18:21. The Daily News of May 8th, in an article on Lord Carnarvon's resignation, says, Mr. Carlyle, wearied with much 18th century talk about virtue, somewhere requests a talker with a strong adjuration to be virtuous and have done with it. Too much praise of what is, after all, but the carrying into statesmanship of the laudable but not marvellous practice of common honesty might lead the hearer to express a similarly petulant prayer. It is not at all desirable that a politician should be perpetually interrogating his conscience to see what its opinion may be as to this tax on tobacco and that alteration in the bankruptcy laws. Such a practice could only lead to very considerable public inconvenience, and in the case of the individual practising it, to something not very different from hypocrisy. But occasions may and do arise when a policy or an individual measure commends itself to the majority of a ministry which seems morally wrong or politically unadvisable to some member thereof. When this is the case, ought he to put his convictions in his pocket and salve his conscience with the theory of party allegiance, or ought he to go out from those respecting whom he feels that he is not of them? No one will in words profess the former doctrine, but many will act upon it. Lord Carnarvon has acted upon the latter doctrine, which everybody professes, but many set aside in practice. Of course, it is important that the conscience appealed to should be a healthy conscience, not given to unnecessary questioning and quibbling. Not only do we admire the consistency of Lord Carnarvon, but we wish we saw a little more of it among professing Christians. We know some ministers who do not believe the doctrines of the church to which they belong, and yet for reasons best known to themselves they remain in that community and undermine the very foundations of the faith which they profess to preach. How this can be made to be in accordance with morality we know not. Surely it would be more like common honesty if they would at once show their colours, and no longer pretend to be what they are not. Some Christians, too, who never enter a pulpit, are equally guilty, for they are recognized as members of churches against whose teaching they frequently protest. They support evil systems and know them to be evil. They dissent in their hearts, but yet consent by their actions for fear of giving offence to men. They are constantly offending God and their own consciences. Whatever their excuses may be, are they not resolvable into doing evil that good may come? Of course it is not to be desired that men should be perpetually vexed with scruples upon minor points, and ready to quarrel about anything or nothing because their conscience is morbidly sensitive, but surely it cannot be right for a truthful man to be a member of a church from whose confession he widely disagrees. His position is a protest against his own convictions, and his convictions make his profession a falsehood. We ought to be intensely anxious to be so clear in the whole of our religious standing that under the light of the day of judgment no glaring contradictions shall be discovered in our lives. Otherwise, we may not only be guilty of something not very different from hypocrisy, but we may fall into hypocrisy itself. A little tampering with conscience is a very dangerous thing. It is very like the dropping of a stitch, which may lead to the unravelling of all the work. We used to say in our childhood, "He who steals a pin will live to steal a bigger thing." The rhyme was bad, but the doctrine was true. If we violate conscience, even upon the smallest matter, we may come at last to have no conscience at all. Mr. Carlyle's advice is thoroughly sound, and his adjuration is none too strong. Be virtuous and have done with it. Speak the truth and stand to it. Profess the faith which is revealed in the Scriptures, and neither by word of mouth, nor by act, nor by association, nor even in thought, contradict the eternal verities of God. We have had too much of concession in order to win a hollow peace from philosophic rationalists on the one hand and superstitious Romanizers on the other. The thing will not work, and if it would, it is wrong and ought not to be attempted. Who gave us the right to yield an atom of truth? Are the doctrines of God's word yours or mine to do as we like with, to give up this and modify that? Nay, verily, we are put in trust with the gospel, and it is at our peril that we dream of compromising the least of its teachings. A straightforward, decided line of testimony is the best, is most consistent with true charity, and in the end will most promote peace. The trimming, hesitating policy of many reminds us of Luther's words to Erasmus, "You desire to walk upon eggs without crushing them, and among glasses without breaking them. This is a difficult game to play at, and one which is more suitable for a clown at a theatre than a servant of Christ. When you are attempting a compromise, you have to look around you and move as cautiously as a tight-rope dancer, for fear of offending on one side or the other. A little too much this way, or that, and over you go. A cat on hot cinders is in an enviable position. No true-hearted man will ever bear such wretched constraint for any length of time, or indeed at all. Think of being able to go no further than the aforementioned timorous, time-serving Erasmus, who said, "I will not be unfaithful to the cause of Christ at least, so far as the age will permit me. Out upon such cowardice, life is too dear when bought at such a price. I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for my single self I had as life not be, as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself." This concludes our reading. Thank you for listening.